The following is a presentation given by Lisa Carlone Steindorf, founder and director at Core Success, international thought leader, motivational speaker, and award-winning author. The concepts and practical tools that Lisa shares help people around the world to transform their limiting beliefs and behaviors into lives that are inspiring, empowering, and meaningful.
What I wanted to talk about this morning is what I call empowered authenticity. And I've been doing a lot of observing lately of myself and also other people, and how we have learned to dance around our own truths and also around other people's truths, things that we see in ourselves, things that we see in them or experience, and then how we talk about it, what we share, how we taint it, what we withhold. And I recognize that the relationships that are really solid, that feed us, the people from whom we walk away and say, yeah, that's somebody I want in my life, those are the people with whom we can share our real selves. And I'd like to have a conversation about that takes it from this lofty, well, be your real self and be your best self, down to really, well, what do you mean by that, and how does that look? So just for the terminology, the best term that I can come up with to talk about in being our real selves is being authentic. Yeah. And coming from the Latin root of auto, meaning self, being authentic for me in the world means giving ourselves the radical permission to be all of ourselves without judgment, and being congruent inside and out. So if I'm feeling uncomfortable in a conversation with you, and I'm noticing it, which I hope that I do because I'm a student of myself, then I wouldn't just plaster a smile on my face. I would track it, see what's going on, and then I would share, I'm feeling uncomfortable, or I'm not sure why you're saying this to me, something here doesn't feel good to me. That I would address what's going on, give myself permission to do that, and to have trust in myself that that's the thing to do now. Yeah, so before I jump into the why and then how and when do we do that, I just want to know if there's anything you want to clarify that before we go on.
No, I think this is a very, very good premise to start from. Maybe one clarification. When you talk about permission to be ourselves without judgment, you're talking about without ourselves judging ourselves.
That is correct. And without the fear of other people judging us. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why why I will always keep the Genius of Non-Judgment as a free training, because that's the foundation of everything, is how we judge ourselves or how we believe others are judging us, because that's the measure we use. That's why we do hide. Yeah. This fear of those judgments. So, or fear of hurting people, which is another thing that we can talk about. So, okay, so the question of why, let's first look at why we don't show all of ourselves. Why do we hide ourselves? And we can go all the way back to, when we were kids and we said what we thought. I was at a function recently, and this sweet little girl, big hair of black curls and big brown eyes and this smile that just lit up the world. She fell in love with me. Montana was her name, and I was just as excited about her. And so we spent a lot of time together, and her mother was drop dead gorgeous, must have been a model, tall, slender, lovely woman. And so we met at one of the meals, and the little girl came up to me. She was all excited, and we were chatting, and then I stood up. I'd been kneeling down, and then I stood up, and she was probably maybe 5 or 6 years old, and her mother was standing there behind her. And then she points to my stomach, and she pokes my stomach, and she said, "How come you're fat?" And her mother, now I have no problem with that question, her mother grabs her hand, pulls her back, and said, "Montana, we don't do that." And I saw the look on this little girl's face of shock and fear that she had done.
Confusion, probably.
I'm sorry?
And confusion, probably. Like, why not?
Well, I didn't see confusion, actually.
Oh, really?
I saw shock
Okay.
and fear and uncertainty, I guess.
Okay.
And I looked at her mom and I said, "Oh, that's okay." And then I looked straight at her and I said, "There's nothing that you can't say to me or ask me." And I said, "So let me tell you something." I said, have you ever had a balloon that you blow up really big and then you don't pop it, but you let the air out and it gets all kind of shrinky, but it never goes all the way back to the same shape it was?" She nods her head. And I said, "Well, I've had 2 babies in my tummy, and when I had them in there, that turned out to be like this big balloon, twice." And I said, "And when they came out, it just never went back to the same shape again." And I said, "But not only that," I said, "even before I had babies, I said, my tummy was never as beautiful and flat as your mommy's." I said, "Because we're all made differently." I said, "Just like you have black curly hair and I have long brown hair." I said, "It's just the way it is." I said, "So that's why my tummy's fat and your mommy's isn't and yours isn't." And she was totally cool with that. So
I love that.
But in order, so that's how we learn, right? That's one situation with one person that girl had on one day of her life, right? And she's 5. And she's going to have probably 27 of those in the next week for the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. So she's going to learn.
If not more, yeah.
If not more, right? So she's going to learn, oh, we do this, we don't do that. And the rules are random. Because now I've told her it's okay. But she's going to go out there and her mother's going to tell her again something else isn't right, or her teacher, or her father, or her best friend, or whomever it is. So we've been trained by ourselves, by our family, people who love us, mean well, and by our culture, you don't do this and you do that. And by the way, this is also culture dependent, right?
Yeah, of course. In
different cultures. So this is why we hide. We've learned to hide ourselves, who we really are, because we've learned that who we really are is somehow inappropriate. We don't quite know when and how, but we just know there's an inappropriateness about me being me. Mm-hmm. So I wake up in the morning with that inappropriateness. And now I have to go into my day trying to figure out, how do I maneuver my day with this inappropriateness that I am?
Yeah, and without even having consciousness of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So every encounter, every phone call I make, every grocery store clerk I speak to, every coworker I'm engaged with, this is my background noise. So this is why we hide. And it has a lot of different problems, independently of, the fear, the discomfort, the lack of fulfillment, because we're not really being ourselves. Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing is that people will then defend being inauthentic. But if I really said how I felt, well, they wouldn't like me, or that relationship would end, or I would lose my job. So we have a lot of justifications for why we are inauthentic. This is a whole training unto itself, but there are 2 basic reasons why it is not useful, and I'm just going to address those here today. In a relationship, and we're just going to stick to relationship, why it is not useful to be inauthentic. So, let's say that, if we just stick with the example of Montana, let's say that she was my age, and she thought I was fat, but she never said it. Mm-hmm. And there were other things that she didn't say about me, and vice versa. There were things about her that I didn't share. And we built a relationship, and we really liked each other. The problem with that is that I, in my heart, know that I'm not being totally straight with her, right? I'm not sharing my thought. Well, gosh, if you would just, for example, brush your hair when you get up in the morning, all those lovely black curls wouldn't, well, we're human, right? We have these thoughts.
Yeah.
Your black curls wouldn't get tangled and you wouldn't get so frustrated. You could do that better. Or, if you weren't so direct, maybe, your friends wouldn't, whatever. So you have these thoughts, but you withhold them. Thinking, well, that's not my place to say. Or if she knew that, she'd be upset with me. So I know I'm withholding, but I'm still doing it. And now let's say she likes me, we're friends. But somewhere inside myself, I know I'm withholding. So the thought comes, well, if I'm all of myself, maybe she won't like me. Maybe she won't want to be my friend. Maybe she'll leave. So even though I have this close friendship with someone, I'm never really solid and secure in it. Because I know I'm not being my whole real self. I'm withholding something, or I'm twisting or tainting what I am sharing out of fear of losing them or hurting their feelings, and I'll get to hurting feelings in a moment. So that I never feel totally solid, right? I never feel like I can totally be myself. On the flip side of that, if I'm inauthentic and somebody does leave me, she said, one day she says, I'm just not interested in being friends anymore. You're always, sharing your feelings, and your time is too tight. We never have time together. I want something different for my friendship.
No.
Now I've lost somebody, but I've lost somebody based on not my real self. I've lost somebody based on a portion of my real self, or a tainted version of my real self. Then I have the thought of, if I had only been myself, if I'd only really just shared all of who I am, maybe they wouldn't have left. Maybe they would have liked who I really am. So now I've lost somebody not really knowing that. And this is how we go through the world with this insecurity of, can I be me? Can't I be me? Do they love me? Do they love the real me? Who is the real me? How can I express the real me? So I said I wanted to, I'm going to get back to that on fear of hurting people. Is there anything you wanted to, anything unclear about that, or anything you wanted to look at?
No, I think this is actually really brilliant, because it's something that a lot of people struggle with, and they actually don't know the difference between a friendship that is of value because they're being their full selves, their full authentic selves, versus relationships where they're guarded and they're deciding what other people can handle, as in what they can hear.
Wecorrect.
And this is something that is just, contributes to a lot of, we'll say, challenges and we'll say dis-ease within relationships.
Absolutely, and within their culture, because that lack of being authentic permeates everything, and we build on that inauthenticity. So we end up building these structures that are actually not really stable. They don't have a solid foundation because there's a lot of inauthenticity that's gone into building them. So another reason that we do this is because we're afraid we're going to hurt somebody's feelings, right? So how often do you see somebody? I used to do this with my kids. And especially my daughter would hate it. She'd come home with a picture. She was young, and she'd say, "Here, Mommy, look at my picture of this elephant. Do you like it?" And I'd say, "Oh, you painted a picture. That's great that you love drawing like that, and thank you so much for sharing it with me." Right? So I haven't answered the question whether I like it or not, because basically it doesn't matter whether I like it. What matters is whether she likes it. So I was trying to establish in her this sense of self-measurement, that she alone decides what she does is valid or not, good enough for her according to her own measurement. So at some point she kind of wanted more than that, so she'd bring the album. She said, "Well, but do you really like it? Do you like it?" And then I'd look at a part and I'd say, "Whoa, you used yellow. I love the color yellow. You used yellow in his trunk. That is so cool." So that worked for a while too. Then at some point she came back to me and she holds the picture in front of my face and says, she's like 11 now, "Do you like my elephant?" And so she's asking for my real opinion, and I'm glad to give that to her. And so what I said to her at that point in time, actually, I personally don't like the elephant, but I like the yellow, and I like the fact that you drew it, and I love that you want to give it to me. Can I please hang it on the refrigerator? Right? She's like, "Sure." So my intention in doing that was for her to groom the sense of herself that her evaluation of who she is and what she does is really the only one that counts, and that the world is going to have different opinions.
Yeah.
And that when those different opinions come, I don't like the elephant. I don't like that it's straight on the backside. I don't like that it has teeny little eyes. I like big eyes, whatever my personal preferences are, but it's her elephant. What does it matter whether I like it or not? If she wants my opinion or she wants to improve her drawing skills, great. But in the end, I want her to be the deciding factor of her evaluation of herself, which is where the judgment comes in. But people judge, and life judges. So we're getting into now the how and the when to be authentic. So we've spoken about the why, because if you're not authentic, you're not going to have relationships that you're really secure in. And when things go south, you have regret, because you've not been your whole self. You've not played full out. So how do we go about being authentic, and when do we do it? The first one is, as I just mentioned, is that self-measurement, that you are the deciding factor for yourself. You trust yourself, and that at any point in time, you can explain yourself to yourself. You know what you're doing, and you know why you're doing it, according to your own value system, your own measurements of what works for you. I'll give you an example. I was recently asked to do I do crisis transformation, and there was a nonprofit here in the local area that was in crisis, and the community was in crisis with their board, and so they asked me to please come and facilitate a conversation for the community. The board was not okay with them having this conversation. Nonetheless, I was asked, and this is what I do, and I was fine doing it. So I went, and the first thing I did was I informed the board that I was going to facilitate this conversation, and they actually sent a board member to the conversation. And I spent 5 hours with the community, and I went through crisis transformation, and as I said, the board member was in the meeting. And I happened to be a participant in this community as well, so that's one of the reasons they asked me. I've also done other pro bono for them as my give back. So as I'm facilitating, I would say 85% of the conversation, I was pure just facilitator. I had my facilitator hat on. There were 2 points in the conversation that I felt strongly about, and I literally, in the room, I physically said, so over here is Lisa, the facilitator, and now I'm going to take off the facilitator hat, and I made that motion to take off the hat, and I walked to the other side of the room, and I said, over here is Lisa, the participant in this community. And as a participant, I'd like to share this information. Now, I was very clear. I made a choice. I trusted myself that this situation was important enough for me to share my opinion. I was also aware in doing so that most likely I was going to have kickback on that, because I'd been asked to do it as a professional, and I decided, do I keep that role 100%? Or do I give myself permission, the radical permission to be me without judgment? Do I give myself permission to bring myself into the conversation? And I gave myself that permission because I wasn't being paid. It was my community, and it was more of a complicated situation. And I was fully aware that there was going to be problems and judgments from that. But I was able to explain myself to myself because these 2 points were important for me. So I did this. And sure enough, what happened was, out of the group, there was about 30 people in the room. Everybody gave positive feedback, not to me, but just to each other. And throughout the conversation, I had asked how things had progressed, and it was all positive. And at the end, it was really a magnificent atmosphere, which usually happens when I do crisis transformation. But there was one person who misquoted me multiple times and said, "I can't believe you're calling our board dysfunctional." And the whole group said, "She never said that. She never said that." I said, "When did you hear me say that?" She repeated. And I said, "What I said was, we have created a system that does not function." And she said, "But you can't call the board dysfunctional." I said, "I didn't say that." But that was her hearing. So in the end, what ended up throughout the community is this person went back to the board, and despite all the other feedback, the board heard that I had called them dysfunctional, which I had never said. Now, why that's important is because I had to live with myself and my decision, and I have no problem doing that. I have no regret. And in that situation, I would have done it again the same way. Because even if I had, this is my conviction, even if I had not taken off my facilitator hat and made those 2 points, that person would have still gone back to the board and had some issue, because that was her hearing.
Something else.
Yes, that was her hearing. And you can, so my point is that you will never, whether you're being inauthentic or you are being authentic, you will never be able to avoid people judging you and things going south. You think you can, but it is simply not possible, because this is the human condition. And when you are being authentic, you have the best chances to stand in a place of integrity and clarity to face those things that are going south. There was a bumper sticker in a previous administration here in this country, which I just loved. And it said, "When you tell the truth, you don't have to remember what you said."
Yeah.
And that's how it is with authenticity. When you are being clear and clean, you stand in that place. And so when judgments come, when you can explain yourself to yourself when you are being authentic, then you can deal with those judgments. You can stand in that place, which confirms yourself to yourself. Now, I want to point out that being authentic is not a license to kill. Yeah. So we have to look at our own judgments. So if I think that somebody is being, unkind, or if I really don't like somebody's dress or whatever it is that they're wearing, I'm not going to go up and say, oh my God, you look horrible in that, whatever it is, and I can't believe that you... It's not my right to do that. I don't need to blurb my judgments onto other people.
And it wouldn't add value to them, to the conversation or anything else, yeah.
Beautiful, adding value. So how can I add value? Am I adding value? And what is my reason for sharing this? Am I doing this for the highest and best for myself first?
Yeah.
And am I doing it for the highest and best for others involved? And if I can contribute in a way that's going to uplift and help, and it doesn't always mean it's going to be well received, like in this facilitation that I spoke of, I'm going to do that because I can answer to myself.
Yeah. And would you say you have to treat the question, am I doing this for the best and highest value of myself and the others on the same level? Because it's not, would there be any point where you would say, it has to be higher for yourself, like the value has to be, the weight of the value has to be greater for yourself or for the others? Like, is there any moment where you would say that?
With the prioritization.
Yeah.
In the end, even if, let's say that you have, I have a friend, another personal example, I have a friend. She's very committed to the environment. She refuses to wash her hair. Shampoo is bad for the environment, even natural shampoo, the tenseed or whatever's in it, so she doesn't wash her hair or hadn't washed her hair. And often I thought she did not look well kept. When she would go to business meetings, I thought, wow, I'm not so sure. So I often thought about sharing this with her, but she never asked for my opinion. And then I asked myself, why am I not sharing it if this is occurring to me as a business person, to say to her, this is going on? And what I realized is if I was scared, if I said it to her, she'd be upset with me. And so in that situation, and I did say it to her, it looks like I would actually be putting her well-being above mine by telling her I felt it would be a good idea if she did something with her hair, because she was going to be seen differently by business people who don't understand her environmental commitment. But I was risking my friendship or my having her, see me badly or getting upset with me in the process. So I could say, well, I was putting her well-being above mine. But in the end, that's not true. Because if I'm going to be authentic and true to myself, that is always the highest. Right? So even though I was, quote unquote, risking my friendship with her, I come back to the first part of my conversation. If I'm going to be with somebody who can't take all of me for who I am and don't want me, then that's not a relationship I want to be in. So I am serving myself. Yeah. So by putting her, quote unquote, needs of presenting herself well in business situations as the top priority, I was also serving myself when I really got down to the chase of it.
Right, and you were serving her as well in case she actually heeded, the reminder that there's certain boxes to tick. Sadly, when you're in a professional environment, and she has a choice to whether she's going to choose to tick those boxes or not, and then
that's right. And you bring up a very good point in her choice, is that when I share my authenticity, I'm not right. And I'm not wrong. This is simply my perspective, and I'm clear on that. I don't know any better about how she should appear in the world, but I do know what I've heard and what works in business from what I've seen, what I've experienced, what I advise people. So I shared that with her from that perspective. And then she can do with that what she wants. So that lack of judgment on my part is really important when I'm sharing, because I don't know best. And like if we go back to the little girl Montana who poked my tummy, there are people that will not like that, especially women.
Yeah.
But I said to her, me? you can say anything to. And that is the truth. So she knows there's one person that she can do that with.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can we come back just to explain self to self?
Mm-hmm.
And what does that really mean? And how do people do this when they're sort of new to truly being authentic?
Yes. So, and there's, again, going back to, not again, but being a student of ourselves. So I have the training Core Personal Transformation, which talks about clarity, ownership, resolution, and excellence. When you look at those aspects of yourself, which are core, it's an acronym, CORE, when you live from a place of having clarity about who you are, what you want, and how you do things, when you take ownership for everything that you do and for your participation in everything else that happens, when you have resolution as part of your way of being in the world, cleaning up messes, resolving issues that need to be resolved, keeping up to date on relationships instead of letting things simmer. And when you live from a place of excellence, then you are your own standard of excellence, by the way. Then you are coming from a place where you know at all times who you are, what you're doing, and why you're doing it. You can explain yourself to yourself. What I often hear from people, especially new clients, I ask them a question, they'll say, so I got super frustrated when I left my boss's office and I just started yelling at my coworker. And I would say, why did you yell at your coworker? I don't know. Because we have taught ourselves to not know about ourselves. And so I say, well, if you did know, what's a possible reason?
Explanation.
Right. Yeah. And then, well, it could have been this one. So they actually give themselves then permission to kind of gently touch and get closer to what their real reasons are. Basically, what I'm doing is trying to help them come back to explaining yourself to yourself. What are your reasons for doing what you're doing? What was your original intention for that? And when you find your way out of the forest back to yourself, you can explain yourself to yourself at any point in time. Or if you can't, you at least have the tools to do so. And then you can clean up your messes. Say, wow, I didn't realize I was actually irritated with my boss. And here I am yelling at my coworker. I'm at the wrong address. I need to go clean that up with my coworker. Right? So now I can explain myself to myself, and I can explain myself to my coworker.
Yeah. Okay, so it's just that's really about people allowing themselves to get clear before, and just remove all the judgment and remove all the expectations and the should haves and the would haves and the stuff that the society. Okay, good.
It's like a laser beam. It's like burning off the shaft and then coming down to, okay, this is what's going on. And that really is that's the core of empowered authenticity, is that radical permission to be all of myself without the judgment, so that there's congruency inside and out. Now then, we just one more point I would talk about is timing. There are certain times, if somebody, an extreme example, if somebody has just gone through a loss of either a relationship or a job or a home. I know people who've lost homes in fires, where maybe they should have had insurance, or they should have, installed fire alarms, or in a relationship, if, they had not been unfaithful, what have you. That's not maybe the time exactly when they're in pain to say, well, if you had this, or I see it this way, but to just sit with them. And that congruency can be, how should I say, it can still be there, and then you make a commitment to yourself to share it when this person can hear it better, or when you're going to serve them better by sharing it. That's different than withholding. That's just human decency.
And so the question that comes to my mind is, well, how do you know what's withholding versus deciding what's appropriate?
Excellent point. Your reasons for withholding. We withhold because we don't want to hurt someone's feelings. Right?
Okay.
Or we withhold because we're afraid, like I said, of me telling this friend about her hair, of the consequences.
You're right.
Instead of coming from a place
it's fear-based.
It's fear-based. This is my truth. And it's my truth whether I share it or not. So if I'm not sharing it, I'm doing so, if I'm not sharing it because the time isn't right, or it's not going to serve their highest at this moment, then that's really a decision to postpone it. But I'm not going to keep it for long, because that would be, then I would be fraudulent. If I encounter them again and I don't tell them what's present for me, I'm in a fraudulent relationship then. I'm not being honest with the person I'm with. And in my world, that's out of integrity.
And let's just use this example, right? You're not communicating because it's the wrong time, and then let's say you forget. So does that just mean like you're still congruent with yourself?
It is. I mean, if you truly forget, but life happens. It'll come up again. It's not like it's totally lost. It'll come up again, right? But let me come back to this night. I was at a training recently at Nike. It was really sweet. We were talking about something similar to this, and I said it was almost an all-male room. There were about 4 females in a room of about 55 people. And I said, this is a question for the men. I said, how often have you had your spouse or your partner come down before you all are going out to dinner in a dress, and you really don't like the dress? And they say, hey, honey, how do you think I look? And the first thing out of your mouth is fantastic, right?
Yeah.
I said, what would happen if you would tell the truth? And they moaned and they groaned and, oh my God, and I couldn't do that. I said, but how honest are you being with your spouse? And I go back to my little elephant picture, right?
Yeah.
If you can't find something beautiful about your spouse, I'm curious why you're with them, right? There's got to be some beauty inside or out that you can speak to. And there's also a way to speak to what it is that you don't like.
Yeah.
You look beautiful, your hair looks beautiful, I love the way your eyes shine. That blue isn't the one that I really love on you. I like the yellow dress, actually. There's a way to share information. It doesn't have to be a hammer, and as I said, it's not a license to kill. But there's a way to share with people what you're feeling, and it's not being schmoozy, it's being kind and sharing the goodness first. I love that you're getting dressed up for me. Oh my God. And you put on high heels, which I know you hate putting on. Thank you that you'll do that for me tonight. But if you want to know my honest truth, I don't think that dress looks as nice on you as the blue one or the yellow one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we had that conversation, and the women in the room were all over it. They were like, oh my God, yes! Of course I want you to tell me the truth. And so it was a very interesting exchange, and then we brought it back to business. So how does that work if you're in a business environment, right? And how can you share that information in order for that product, that project, that presentation, whatever it is you're working on together, collaborating on, for that to be the best? How can it possibly be the best if everybody in the room is not telling themselves or each other the truth?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I actually just had a conversation with somebody who used to work with somebody that I actually previously used to coach and thought was a really, really, good, decent human, except I found out that this person was literally like a monster. He was a terrorist and would tell everybody that he certainly that's what he was telling me. I just want people to tell me the truth, and I want this to be a collaboration. But whenever they did, he would completely annihilate them, humiliate them, and time again, people will leave his meetings completely humiliated because of the technique he was using. So this, I love the distinction that you make between, it not being a license to kill, and the how you're going to do it is going to count just as much as what you're going to say.
Yes. And that's why
really good.
Also coming back to that core personal transformation, because when we are students of ourselves, we're going to understand what our fears and our wounds are. And so we're not going to go out there and be terrorists as easily, because we're going to be responsible, and we're going to have to answer to our own selves. And then we're in the world in a different way. And so then authenticity becomes a natural extension of living that excellence according to our own standards.
Yeah, it's beautiful. That's really good.
This has been a presentation by Lisa Carlone Steindorf. You can find out more about Lisa's work and contact her at lisasteindorf.com. Thank you, and be well.